Welcome to Die Hard on a Black, the podcast where we explore the influence of Die Hard on action cinema, one action movie at a time. I'm Philip Gawthorne, and with me as always is Liam Billingham, and today's film is Live Free or Die Hard, aka Die Hard 4.0.
It's Die Hard in DC.
You're giving that more of an ominous tone because you're moderating your volume for your kids. Because I was prepared to be like blasted out the back of the theater.
If they weren't down the hall, like I would pull it as though I were fighting an F-18 next to a freeway.
Yes, it's suitably energetic. So a little bit of admin before we move. This is going to be a big episode, okay, guys? So, like, we're going to give you your money's worth today.
You've all been sitting around going, when do they talk about the non-Die Hard movie? When do we get to that one?
And today is that day.
I'm sure many people signed up and said, yeah, Die Hard 1, 2, 3, but when do we talk about Live Free or Die Hard?
Yes. Well, you know what? In which case we've got so much to cover. Let's leave the admin to the end of the show. We have an important announcement, but let's not clutter the runway. Let's just launch this puppy. Where did you? Now I seem to remember we've been doing this show for a while now, and every time this movie has come up, I think you hadn't actually seen it.
Correct.
And so was this week the first time that you laid eyes on this behemoth?
No, because I have tried to watch this movie 3 times prior to this week, and in all 3 cases fallen asleep at about the same point.
Okay.
Which is about when Bruce Willis gets to Justin Long's apartment for the very first time.
Super early then.
Yeah, probably the 15-minute mark. I remember seeing the trailer for this in 2007 when it came out, and being pretty turned off by the seemingly rah patriotic trailer for this movie, which had like an American flag unveiling, and it was kind of like, the choice will be clear. Like it was very written. I was like, fuck. Like, and even at that point, I was like, this isn't a Die Hard movie. Like, you know, I never lost my love for those original movies. I definitely like took a break from watching them. So when the preview for this came on initially, I was like, I have no interest in this at all. And then I waited, obviously, until we decided to cover this. I watched it on Blu-ray this weekend. Yeah, I have to say this is like a perfectly entertaining. This is maybe the platonic ideal of I'm hungover on a Sunday and this just started on TBS and I know what my afternoon is. And yet it is pretty mediocre in a lot of ways and is ultimately not a Die Hard movie.
Okay.
That's my feeling.
That's where you're coming in. Well, I remember I went to see this when it came out. So I saw it in the theater and I was trying to remember if I was in, what year was it? 2000. I've got my, I need to check on my fast facts. I was trying to work out whether I was in America or not. 2007.
So summer, right? In July.
I can't quite remember where I was, but I definitely remember seeing it in the theater and being kind of pleasantly surprised at like how much I enjoyed it and how entertaining I found it, because it seemed like, wow, it kind of seemed like the answer to the question that nobody asked. You know, when it came out, it was sort of like, I was pretty happy to leave it where it was. At the same time, obviously, I love Die Hard, I love Bruce, I love action movies, so I was pretty open to it. And I remember, I was pleasantly surprised by that. At the same time, there were still these lingering things of, like you said, but it's not really a Die Hard movie, is it? Which we will break down in forensic detail as to what point or points it breaks that it is, you know, it just isn't a Die. Well, it just isn't, you know.
Because there are some, like, actually pretty clever John McClane arc things to this movie. I mean, in some weird way, this is like the darkest timeline for McClane. Like, Holly and he are divorced. They haven't worked it out.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk to his kids, or his kids won't talk to him. And he's like a underpaid senior detective. Like, it has so much 16 blocks in this movie, except maybe the character in 16 blocks is sadder, and also he feels older in 16 blocks than he does in this.
And in less good shape and kind of like downcast.
But yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack with this movie, and I think, we'll jump into this. I'm very excited to talk about this movie's origins. I'm sort of excited to talk about how
research about it. Yeah.
Every Die Hard movie is kind of not based on an original idea.
100%.
I find that so interesting.
I've got a whole section about that where we can dig into that. But before we kind of get into that, there was actually, I wanted to kind of frame part of this opening salvo around this idea, because I was really giving this a lot of thought. And I thought you have brought this up in a previous episode, and I think it might have been the 16 Blocks episode. And my kind of thesis for today is, the expression in music, the cliche of the difficult second album, right? This is the difficult fourth film. There is something unnatural about doing a fourth film. Most stories tend to function on the basis of the rule of three, whether it's 3 acts, 3-act structure, 3 films in a trilogy. Obviously, there are exceptions, but broadly speaking, and it is rare to think of a fourth film in a series that is exceptionally strong. Very difficult to think of any that are among the best or even close to the other films in the series. And so here are some examples, and there are some exceptions.
Let's throw some out.
Because I did some research about this. Jaws: The Revenge, widely considered to be the worst film in that series. Superman 4: Quest for Peace, franchise killer, by far the worst of the original Christopher Reeve iterations. Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, right? Enough said. Again, it was like
better
the trilogy
than Dial
was
of Destiny.
The trilogy was pretty well completed with Last Crusade, and then they bring it back, and it's kind of like it feels somehow like against the grain. Terminator Salvation, kind of a strange and disappointing movie that didn't really add anything to the wider mythos. Star Wars: Phantom Menace. Okay, it was technically a prequel, start of a new trilogy, but again, like kind of very problematic. Scream 4, the Scream sequel that nobody talks about. Now, I'd say there are examples of some films that are maybe in the middle that divide opinion. Lethal Weapon 4, which I think is pretty solid entry. We're going to get to that on 48 Hours
by
of
far the
movies.
Fourth best Lethal Weapon movie.
Alien Resurrection, which I fucking hate, but has its defenders. I think it's a tonal betrayal of everything that was previously established.
Well, there are people who would say the same thing about this film.
Yes, absolutely. So, but again, it kind of illustrates the point. Batman and Robin, which I just can't get on board with. But again, I know it has its defenders. And there are some examples of really strong fourth films. Rocky IV, which is my personal favorite of the entire series. Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol, I think is a really, really good one.
That's the top 3 Mission Impossible movie for sure.
I love that one. And others that were the fourth film, but were kind of a reinvention or reboot that felt like a fresh start, which examples would be Mad Max Fury Road or The Matrix Resurrections, for example, which I really liked, and I think you did as well. I thought it was
that movie is the best one since the original. And
really
I think it's
clever.
Well, I think one thing that you just brought up, I'm going to point to 2 examples. I think Matrix Resurrections is really interesting because it toys with the legacy of the whole series. I think Mission Impossible: Ghost Protocol, well, not a reboot in some ways, is because it's kind of like taking the sort of more dour tone of 3 and sort of going like, let's make this like a little broad, like let's really up the ante on the stakes. Let's like really put Tom Cruise like in danger by putting him on the Burj Khalifa. Like that movie redefined the paradigm. So like it kind of refreshed the series.
Right.
Another one that I want to point to as like not successful, but like a really earnest try is Jason Bourne.
Yes, I actually had that on the list because the fourth one, well, it depends if you consider the Renner sort of sidequel, Bourne Legacy, which is technically the fourth film, was sort of an offshoot. Or you're saying the actual
I think about
Jason
Bourne as the fourth film,
one with Matt Damon that was called just Jason Bourne.
And I think it's important to consider that one the fourth, with no disrespect to the legacy, because it brings back Paul Greengrass. And as we've talked about on the show, I just sort of I read the book about him by Tom Schoen, which I really, really highly recommend. And like, it's kind of an interesting moment because they were like, they didn't want to revisit it. And then the Snowden stuff happened, and all this sort of like hacker shit happens, which has some links with
relevant
this movie, actually. Yeah. And they were like, okay, well, it's now or never. And I think that when you watch that movie, it's well done, it's exciting, but it can't recapture that the magic
because it's
of
already
supremacy.
ended.
Exactly.
That's the thing. It's and that's why all these things are like alien resurrection. Like you're resurrecting a corpse. That's what I mean about there's something unnatural about that process in a lot of cases. And I said, with all this in mind, I think this contextualizes the challenges of doing a fourth film in any series, because when they're done right, they do feel like a natural extension of a longer series, as some of the examples that we've cited, like Rocky IV or maybe Mission Impossible. But when they're done wrong, they feel unnatural and forced and like this an answer to a question that nobody asked. And I think with this film, now taken on its own terms, I think it's actually a pretty terrific action movie with some really fun elements, some
great
clever, prescient ideas. Yeah, some really imaginative and inventive set pieces. But as a Die Hard movie, it feels like, at best, a decent movie that's a little bit disconnected from the rest of the series, and at worst, an utter betrayal of everything that preceded it. But every film that we cover on this show, gets a fair hearing, regardless of reputation. I think there's a lot of things I think are fantastic, actually, about this film, especially if you take it in isolation. But we're going to kind of look at it from both angles, as like on its own terms and as a film in the Die Hard series.
Yeah. No, I think that totally makes sense. And I think there is like enough interesting shit going on in this movie. And we have to, because it's a Die Hard movie. So we would be loath if we did not cover this film.
Oh, of course. I love doing the actual Die Hard films. It's a real, it's awesome. So let's get some fast facts in play. This film was directed by Len Wiseman, based on a screenplay by Mark Bombach, of which derived from a story by Bombach and David Marconi, which was in turn based on the article A Farewell to Arms by John Carlin, which we will talk about, and characters originally created by Roderick Thorpe, and the list goes on and on.
Just the layers of that,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then, of course, the writers of Die Hard, the adaptation of Nothing Lasts Forever by Jeb Stewart and Stephen E. D'Souza. Produced by Michael Fottrell, it stars Bruce Willis, Justin Long, Timothy Olyphant, Cliff Curtis, and Maggie Q. It was distributed by 20th Century Fox. The release date was June 27th, 2007. Budget, $110 million.
This movie is huge. Like
box office, though, $388.2 million. I believe making it the most successful film in the series.
At this point, Bruce is just printing money.
So, its reputation, I think, is a little bit like mixed, but this was a huge success. And it was popular critically as well. Actually did well critically.
I think it's also important to point out that this is in some ways the last bastion of original monoculture, because we're a year away from Iron Man, which didn't kickstart the superhero wars, but is that and the Dark Knight are sort of the big shot.
The superheroification, if you will, of cinema and the action genre especially. And this film is right in that mix. It kind of turns him in. We will talk about it when we get to the hero section, but essentially he does become a superhero as opposed to the original character. But we'll get into that. But first of all, we have to, talk about how we put this film under the microscope. And we took it to the lab.
How's the power grid?
You know what? There's been storms here, so we are literally planning for a power outage. But we took the film to the lab and we examined its
Die Hard DNA.
Okay, now
I can't do it loud, so I'm going to make it go
pretty
long.
Obvious. It is obviously a direct sequel to Die Hard with a Vengeance. It deals with a terrorist attack on U.S. soil. Legacy characters are featured, obviously the main one being John McClane, but also his adult daughter, Lucy McClane, who featured in the first film when she was a young child.
Hello, Lucy McClane.
McClane residence, Lucy McClane speaking. Despite and the other line where she goes, "Go Oh no, sorry.
Come home.
Come home, when Thornburg is harassing them. Despite the best efforts of the authorities, ultimately it becomes up to one man to resolve the crisis and save the day. The police and the feds can only do so much, and our hero character clashes with the FBI, although the FBI and the federal authorities are portrayed much more sympathetically here than in many previous Die Hard films. The action, of course, centers around one event over an important holiday, the 4th of July here, as opposed to Christmas Eve in Die Hard 1 and 2. The hero and the villain are in separate physical spaces for most of the film and mainly communicate over the airwaves. But they have a couple of powerful scenes together where they face off, and the film culminates with McClane's loved ones being held hostage and used as a human shield, and McClane has to cleverly outwit the principal villain in order to get the drop on him. Also, a couple of footnotes, hacking a key aspect of the first movie, as we've talked about, in the guise of the iconic and much-loved character of Theo, played by the dearly missed Clarence Gilliard Jr., is now front and center to the whole concept of this picture. And there is an Easter egg appearance here from an FBI special agent named Johnson. No relation.
But no relation to the original.
Exactly.
Johnsons. Well, I think you nailed it. It is one thing we have not said is that none of the original creative team comes back for this movie.
You can kind of feel it.
Boy, do you feel it.
You can kind of feel it, yeah.
I was texting with our buddy Jason Bailey about this movie, and Jason fucking hates this movie. And one of his gripes is the way it looks. It just doesn't look like a Die Hard movie. And I have some thoughts about that as well.
It has a kind of muted palette.
It looks like a Len Wiseman movie.
Yeah.
All of his movies look like this.
Yeah.
Whether that's your thing or not, it looks like an Underworld movie. And I have to say, I like the first Underworld movie. I think it's a lot of fun. I didn't watch any of the subsequent movies, but
second one's actually really good. Really good.
I mean, the idea is really cool, and I'll watch Kate Beckinsale read from the phone book personally. But
if she's wearing that jumpsuit, no, Kate Beckinsale's amazing. Of course, I love Kate.
No, she's really. And, that's a good. Oh, it's incredible. And that's a good part for her. But no, it looks like a Len Wiseman movie. And that's I think that has its detractors and it has its fans, right? But I do think that that's kind of his auteurist stamp, is very specific blue-looking movies that look blue and pretty inventive action.
Yeah. And he's a very interesting filmmaker. I'm being facetious there, but I'm actually a huge Kate Beckinsale fan. So just to clarify that, I think that came across as not how I intended. But I am a big fan of hers, and I actually really like those movies. And I think that the Total Recall remake is an interesting example.
She's in that too, right?
Which she's also in, which is also directed by Len Wiseman. Is a similar example of a film that is got some amazing ideas. Amazing world building, some strong performances, but doesn't have a raison d'etre. And I think it's a more acute version of what happens here, because I think there's really great stuff in this, and this film does have much more meat and substance to it. But the Total Recall remake is a good example of Len Wiseman's really talented director, knows how to come up with these great sequences, but it doesn't necessarily, it's lacking maybe a little bit of soul,
it's
to
interesting
some extent.
Because he, I didn't realize, I think I knew this, but I'd forgotten, is that he worked on props on Stargate, Independence Day, Men in Black, and Godzilla.
It comes from a kind of production design standpoint. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can kind of feel there's a little bit of, he's a little more if Roland Emmerich or Duncan Jones is a way I would think about a little bit. These very, bigger scale movies, but I think that he always tries to nestle very specific idea in there. And Duncan Jones is a filmmaker whose sci-fi work I find really, really fascinating. But yeah, he's really has a thing he does, right? And I think some people love it, and I think some people don't. And he's an interesting choice for this movie.
Yeah. Well, we will dig into all that in much more detail after this quick break.
Oh, we'll be right back.
And we're back.
How was your break?
I'm planning my backhand for this.
Good.
I am planning it meticulously, and I'm going to get to
We'll
it.
get there, baby.
One day.
Get there.
It was fine. Thank you so much
Good.
for asking.
It was very short. So
it was short and sweet. Okay, so we are now into our main event, the main meat in the sandwich here, the anatomy of an action movie, where we explore the tenets.
We live in a twilight world.
And the left at dusk of an action motion picture, starting with the premise. Okay, so it is kind of a complicated one, so I did write it down. And for anyone unfamiliar,
kind of complicated, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It took a bit of wrestling.
It's no Fled for those who listen to this.
For the real heads on the
no, not for the real heads. For the
that episode tanked. Right? No one can find the movie. No one seems to care about the movie. I was like, I love this movie. No one.
You can find it. You can find it on DVD. No extras. No extras. Believe it or not.
Oh, I love Fled. Okay, the premise of Die Hard 4.0, aka Live Free or Die Hard, is as follows.
Okay.
After a group of elite hackers led by former government cybersecurity expert Thomas Gabriel, Timothy Olyphant, initiate a massive cyber attack on critical US infrastructure, grizzled NYPD detective John McClane, Bruce Willis, is dragged into the fray when he is asked to facilitate the routine transfer of a skilled young hacker named Matt Farrell, Justin Long, whom the villains now want dead. The mismatched duo of McClane and Matt are then forced to work together to escape the hired killers who are after them and resolve the wider crisis. But when Gabriel learns of McClane's involvement, he seeks to turn the tables by targeting McClane's emotionally estranged daughter Lucy, played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and using her as a pawn in his master plan, thus forcing McClane to dig deep in order to save both the country and his daughter. Which kind of illustrates the complexity and the kind of Frankenstein together nature of the. I mean, this film had a pretty tortured development history, as a lot of the Die Hard films have.
Yeah, it feels like it does. Like that's something that I can say is that like you feel the pieces of this movie kind of like rumble into
Sometimes
place.
It's like the gears are grinding against it. Mm-hmm. I think that overall, they did like. Considering when we actually get into all of the iterations of what this once was and what they explored and what they abandoned and what they patched together, it's a pretty amazing job actually of making it as like coherent and clean and strong. Mm-hmm. And as I say, it was a huge hit. You cannot like argue with the box office.
$400 million movie.
But to your point earlier, this is why I wanted to dig in on this. Die Hard. Like a lot of the Die Hard movies, it feels like a story that was spot welded onto a Die Hard movie, as opposed to an organic. This is a story about John McClane in XYZ situation.
Well, here's why I think that's interesting, because one thing this movie does well is the wrong place, wrong time. Like he just happens to be near Matt Farrell's apartment. Checking out his daughter. Checking in on his daughter, I should say. He is kind of just there. He's in the wrong, like this might be the best example of wrong place at the wrong time, because kind of similar in Die Hard 2, but in Die Hard 3, like Simon Gruber seeks him out, right? So in this case, it's kind of like if he hadn't been in Jersey being an asshole, frankly, to his daughter, and that's something we should talk about too.
Absolutely, we will. He's a jerk. He's a real prick in this film.
Yeah. There was an interesting review I read that was like, this movie made me hate John McClane.
Yeah, I can see why. We'll get into it in the hero section. I've got points about it.
But it does... It's interesting how like the shape of these movies are kind of like, okay, so there's a South American dictator, and these hardline neocons want to get him to the US and free him. And then John McClane shows up. Like that makes sense in the Die Hard verse, is that there's this whole storyline and no one anticipated that this like fly in the ointment, pain in the ass was going to show up. So it almost makes sense from a creative perspective that like, and then John McClane shows up is like a really, because it's the wrong man at the wrong time. That's what these movies are in some really, really interesting way.
What it's also not, and we talked about this, is it's really not a guy in a box, because the box is now too big.
Well, and it's interesting because there are people who we know that will say like Die Hard of the Vengeance is a good movie, but it like ruins the formula. However, I would argue that like Manhattan in a way is a box.
Yes. Yeah.
And it works for me as an island, right?
Yes.
It works for me in that sense. This one just is like, who cares? Forget
it just
it.
feels
Doesn't matter.
completely like it's national now, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not even, I mean, obviously it's somewhat localized to Washington, D.C., but it just feels like there's parts of it that's like a road movie.
Well, this is the 9/11 Die Hard movie.
Right.
You know, I mean, I'm not trying to say that it's about 9/11 because it's not, but, but what it does sort of do is like, it's not about like Nakatomi's under attack or Dulles is after attack.
Right.
It's the nation is under attack, which
in some ways you could say is maybe a natural evolution of the formula, right? Like we kind of talked about with Armageddon. It was like, in the first movie he saves a skyscraper, in the second movie he saves an airport, the third movie he saves New York, and in the Armageddon, the only place to go is to save the entire planet, right? So it's almost like a step
Die
down
Hard
from
in space,
save
for sure.
the country, and obviously that did tap into, I think, a subconscious collective psyche, because movies are about correcting scars on some.
Totally.
When it comes to like a shared psyche standpoint, right? Like 9/11 was a shared trauma for the entire nation and the entire world. What if a similar situation happened, but Bruce Willis kicked the perpetrators' asses? On a subconscious level, that's something that people can get on board with. And I think that's why the Rambo movies were re-legislating Vietnam, right? What if we won and went back and kicked their ass? And the Chuck Norris movies that are like about the hostage crisis in Iraq. What if it didn't go wrong and we actually kicked their asses? Movies are often about that.
Well, the Bourne movies are about that, about 9/11. I mean, I think the Transformers movies are explicitly about that, right? So it's like, yeah, and I think this movie totally toys with it. But to this movie's credit, its story origins are in an article that predates 9/11 by 4 or 5 years.
Let's get into that, because to that point that we talked about earlier about how almost none of the Die Hard movies are actually originally Die Hard movies. So for anyone unfamiliar, the first Die Hard is very different from the source material from which it is based, which is the Nothing Lasts Forever novel, in which the hero is a much older security consultant named Joe Leland. But much of the rest of the story is broadly the same. But even at its inception point, it was never a John McClane. John McClane was never in the source material as a character. Die Hard 2 was based on a novel named 58 Minutes by Walter Wager that had nothing whatsoever to do with Die Hard. They took that premise and grafted a Die Hard story onto it.
And it did it pretty successfully.
And did it very well.
Yeah.
Similarly, Die Hard with a Vengeance evolved out of another spec called Simon Says that was similarly reworked and repurposed to become a Die Hard sequel. And if you're interested in this in more detail, we've covered it in those previous episodes on each of the other Die Hard films.
One interesting connection is, if I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that script is by Jonathan Hensley.
Yes,
who
so he was readapting
Armageddon,
and he was readapting his own. He was adapting his own work, so it became. But I believe, as I recall, I think William Wisher, who was also involved on this film, was involved with that script. And there tends to be other cooks in the kitchen. Some of them uncredited.
The world of that stuff is so fast. I find it so fascinating.
It's not that interesting. Well, like for a living.
But when you go back to like the 70s, and it's we paid Robert Towne, with $4 million to show up for 10 minutes.
So in this case, Die Hard 4 evolved out of other material again. So the film's plot is based on an earlier script entitled WorldWar3.com by David Marconi, screenwriter of Enemy of the State, very adjacent film to this, which was inspired by John Carlin's Wired magazine article, A Farewell to Arms. Based on that article, Marconi crafted a screenplay about a cyber terrorist attack on the US. The fictional attack concept is called a fire sale in the movie.
Not a word that shows up in the article.
No, but it features prominently in the film. After the 9/11 attacks, the project was stalled, only to be resurrected several years later and rewritten into Live Free or Die Hard by Doug Richardson and eventually by Mark Bomback. So let's just talk about the article for a second. Would you feel comfortable taking a stab at summarizing it?
So it's written in 97. And I think the way to think about it, it's a dense article, and it has a lot of terminology. The best way that I can think about it is for those in the audience who ever watched Parks and Recreation. There's an episode where they do like a emergency day where they like with students plan a fake emergency.
Right.
And the students are like their emergency services or their city government. And it's like, how do you respond in the wake of the entire power grid going out on the West Coast, right? Or how do you, if there's a series of seemingly random occurrences that are, a plane gets hijacked or a plane crashes and Turkey's economy goes down, whatever, that actually end up being the work of some kind of enemy to the United States, right? And what is, I think, the most fascinating aspect of this, and I wrote this quote down from the article. So the idea is that they're trying to figure out, like, how do we respond to an intelligence war? How do we respond to being attacked, to having our data stolen, to having our systems shut down, right? Do we run backups from a secure location in a hillside in Virginia or West Virginia, whatever the case might be? But one of the things that's really interesting about this article is there's no sense of where that could come from. There's no like, and it would be the Russians. And that really fascinates me in the annals of Die Hard history, because I wrote this quote down from the article. Yet for all the bustle, and in this case, the bustle is referring to all of these committees and groups and activities that are put together to think of how to combat a hypothetical digital attack. Yet for all the bustle, there's no clear direction. For all the heat, there isn't a great deal of light. For all the talk about new threats, there's a reflexive grasp for old responses. Now, we never covered this movie because it didn't really make sense, but one of my favorite lines from action movies is in The Peacemaker. One of the guys goes, "God, I miss the Cold War."
Right.
And I bring that up because
the simplicity of who your enemy is. Yeah. It's not like amorphous. Yeah.
This is kind of like, for lack of a better word, the postmodern Die Hard movie.
Yeah.
Where the first one is like, in cleverly so, is the remnants of the Cold War order, but in this case, it's fake German, fake terrorists from Germany who are really yuppies, right? Who want money. In the second movie, it's these, as you pointed out in our episode, these neocons who are trying to free a South American dictator, right? That's a big part of it, and they're going to run off together.
It was very Oliver North coded.
Yeah, totally. Right. Noriega and that kind of thing. And then the third movie is like, it's not lost on me that Simon is supposed to be a member of the East German Brigade, and that, what's the name of the big dude in that one? The big Hungarian guy, you know who I'm talking about? Like, he's like a Hungarian army member. Like,
I know who you mean, but
it's the ghosts of the Cold War, like coming back for revenge. And in this movie, it's like we're
beyond that.
We don't even know
New World Order, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is really interesting. And we could talk, we're not going to get into this, but it's an extremely prophetic article about the uses of misinformation to topple powerful empires, which, is the war that has been fought in different iterations in different ways and is playing out in terrifying ways all over the world right now. But that's my read of this article, is that it's like, we are under a huge threat and we don't know where it's coming from. I think Catherine Bigelow's newest movie, House of Dynamite, touches on some of this stuff too. Like, who is the villain?
And I mean, my read of it as well, I can see why Hollywood kind of jumped on it, because it sort of is almost like a roadmap of these are the kind of threats we could face in terms of like attacks on infrastructure on a massive scale, and these were the kind of responses that we might put together to tackle it. But what it really illuminates is a lot of interagency chaos and confusion about whose remit it is, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's like federal, whether it's
DHS.
state, whether it's CIA, NSA, DHS, which I don't even know if it had been formed yet, because I think that was like post 9/11. So all of this,
not with the article, with the movie, but not with the article.
With the article.
The DHS is 03, if I remember, or ICE is 03.
Post,
so that
post
larger,
9/11,
yeah.
So it's a pretty interesting piece of work.
Well, and my last point, and we've talked about this before, is you can almost trace the history of modern action movies, from which we have been doing, from Die Hard to this movie, because in the first movie the hacker's like a peripheral goofball, and in this movie the villain is a disenfranchised programmer. Like,
And it's another enemy within character.
Yeah. And this is the first one with an enemy within, because I don't think you can really count those Oliver North neocons in quite that way.
But in other action films, we've had Ed Harris in The Rock and Tommy Lee Jones in Under Siege so on and so forth, where there's often been an enemy with, or John Malkovich in Line of Fire, which we haven't covered. But this was like a trend in action films.
Can we cover it? Because Rene Russo's in it.
The other thing I think that's worth talking about with this film is the title. Willis said in 2005 the film will be called Die Hard 4.0, which is what I knew it as because that was a British title, as it revolves around computers and cyber terrorism. It was IGN later reported the film was to be called Die Hard Reset, which kind of touches on what we've talked about how a trilogy, it feels like the natural cycle of things, and then if you're going to start it again, you have to start it up to varying degrees of success.
There's also the line in the movie where Justin Long is like, I've thought about hitting the reset button, melting the system just for fun. Like, that makes sense as a title.
Because you're essentially killing the power of the country.
Way better title.
Yeah. 20th Century Fox later announced the film as Live Free or Die Hard, based on New Hampshire's state motto, Live Free or Die, which is attributed to a quote from General John Stark. So just to cover that. You've already touched on this.
I think a bad title.
Well, like I said, I think again to the sort of unnatural awkwardness of it, to have a film when Die Hard is not, it doesn't begin with, it's Die Hard with a Vengeance. Great title, but blah blah and Die Hard. There's something off about that straight away that just doesn't feel quite right. You know.
And I was living in Prague when this movie came out, and in Prague it was called Die Hard 4.
Yeah, everyone just be simple.
Title. Yeah,
be simple.
What else? They're selling it to Americans on the 4th of July. Like I get it.
My, take on this overall, and I kind of had to the title of it all, and then we can kind of get into what is this movie about, which we've already sort of touched on. But, I actually think if this was just a Bruce Willis political action thriller, everything is exactly the same, but he's just not called John McClane and is a different character, and it was called Fire Sale, right? Or something. I mean, I think its reputation and legacy would be very different. Now, because taken on its own terms, it's pretty darn good. It's really, really good.
It's very entertaining.
As a Die Hard movie, it feels strange and inconsistent. I mean, the title, if I was, as a piece of commerce, you can't argue with the results. But, the poet in me wants it to be called something more like my title would be like The Tree of Liberty. You know what I mean? I would want something more elevated like that. But obviously, you would really want to call it something like, Sum of All Fears, Armageddon, those kind of titles
it is a Tom Clancy adjacent. Like it's
very
living in the
so.
shadow of Tom Clancy.
I mean,
I think
if it was, you could totally see Harrison Ford playing a version of like some kind of a DC cop, who is like a gruff, grumpy guy transferring a prisoner and then gets involved in this national attack.
Yeah.
Right? Like it. Don't get me wrong, Bruce, obviously great, but it is that their film exists at a tension point where it's like it never was intended to be a Die Hard film. As all of these films, it is reverse engineered or grafted onto a Die Hard framework. And there were all these different iterations where at one point his son was the Matt Farrell character. They were going to do that.
Yikes.
They ended up not going in that direction. There was a version of it where Lucy McClane was not involved at all. And then they eventually which is why that subplot feels a little bit
like tied to the rest.
Disconnected and then comes back in. They do it in a clever way.
And Mary Elizabeth Winstead is great. Yeah. I like her in everything she does. So
me too. But as a piece of commerce, undeniably successful. But I suppose, there's three, right? What works, what doesn't, and what's this movie about? What do you want to talk about?
Let's talk about what works and what doesn't, because I think in some ways it's pretty obvious what it's about, which is McClane facing a new kind of unknown terrorism and the enemy from within, right? But I do think I was actually going to suggest we do the what doesn't work. So I want to start with something that, let's start with what does work.
Okay, cool.
I think this movie is not a good Die Hard movie, but it understands a John McClane arc, which is at the beginning of the movie, he's not talking to his daughter. At the end of the movie, his daughter He's back on his daughter's good side. And it does smart things with the way he doesn't understand technology, the time watch in a digital age. It kind of brings him back to the first movie. I don't mean to be a purse grabber, but I hate that he refers to Maggie Q as the Asian chick. Like, I just feel like
some of that stuff is really bad.
And
we've got to talk about that in the hero section.
It's frustrating.
It's aged horribly, and it's really ugly.
Yeah, it's really ugly. And like, I don't think of McClane in that. Like, I had one of those, forgive me for doing this, but I had this moment where I was like, is John McClane supposed to be like a MAGA guy? Like, what is the deal here? It's just like, he's so kind of like barbarian in some weird way. And like, it feels like a reversion.
Yeah.
But it does get the arc. And like, at one point someone refers to him as a times watch in a digital age. And I was like, that's McClane. Like,
that was the kind of shorthand. That's the kind of thing that gets the studio to sign off on it, because the skill in when you've got something that is this complex, that it's been Frankenstein together out of all of these different sources. And it's like, it's too hard to wrap it's actually distilling it to something simple, as clear as that. And the sort of analog guy in a digital world. Boom! They can kind of wrap their head around it in a simple way.
They should have done more of it, because it's really great, So that's something that works. I don't think McClane as a character, though, works in this movie, because I think this is one of the most mean-spirited blockbusters ever.
Well, maybe we should just bring this into the hero section, right? Because it does get to the core of, I think, the fundamental problems with it, because that was exactly how I felt, where Bruce Willis's character in this version of it, now I really gave this a lot of thought, he comes across as a mean, unlikable bully who insults people based on physical characteristics, like particularly the Kevin Smith character, who he calls a dump truck, threatens to beat him to death in his own basement. It's like and then the things that you're saying about the Maggie Q character, where some of the dialogue is, and I'm quoting, "I've met some bitches in my time, but you," before beating her up and later referring to her as a dead Asian hooker bitch. Now, admittedly, he's doing that to antagonize Thomas Gabriel's character.
That feels McClane-ish.
Still all leaves a bad taste in the mouth and feels like a miscalibration for the character. And I think the difference is, when McClane was always this smart-mouthed, wise-ass, as we discussed in the first film, bit of a Neanderthalic character, he was never punching down. He was the underdog, standing up to blowhard assholes like Dwayne T. Robinson or the Dennis Franz character in Die Hard 2, who were authority figures that were they were the bullies. They were the pricks. They were ignorant and arrogant.
He's the bully in this movie.
He's the bully this time, and he's picking on people that are either physically slighter than him or physically less, in shape. And it all just comes, it's like that was a fundamental, for me, miscalibration, that they just, it's like, no, he has to be the underdog. He doesn't punch down, he punches up, and they got, for me, in my humble opinion, that was a real misstep about the character.
And it's a little bit, I was going to ask you earlier, like, what were Bruce's producerial hands on this movie? Because I'm surprised. And look, maybe Bruce was like, you know what? Sign the check. You know what I mean? But like, I'm surprised Bruce, who like by this point essentially has to be a producer on these movies, whether it, wasn't a little more pushing back on some of this. Because, I don't know. I think of him as a smart actor with 100%,
and with a huge sense of authorship over this character. This is the character that, despite doing an amazing body of work, this is the character that he's always going to be
and the most iconic action hero in movies. Probably.
And that's the other thing about this film where it goes wrong, is because it was, as we talked about, this whole show is about how the original Die Hard movie was a paradigm shift for the action genre, where it was about an ordinary guy who was in this situation, and as opposed to these invulnerable Ubermensch characters as embodied by Schwarzenegger and Stallone, and to a lesser extent Chuck Norris in the 1980s. And now he has become one of those characters. By this point, he becomes across as indestructible, as invulnerable. You never once worry that he is gonna die, that he's in danger, that he is even like gonna really lose any battle in any situation. He has by this point become a full-on superhero, and by the time that he is jumping onto the plane, which is a great stunt, although a little bit similar to True Lies, like that sort of stuff, which is also about a guy trying to get his daughter back. So I think while that is a really, really cool sequence in isolation, fantastically realized, by the time John McClane is doing that, I'm like, this is so far from the guy that jumped off Nakatomi Plaza and was with his feet bleeding.
And
for me,
you just hit on something, which is you've said this before, like, he's not, this isn't a Jim Cameron movie. And what I mean is that, like, one of the things that is really, we've said this before, is really powerful about Jim Cameron is that, like, he's both anti-militaristic and loves hardware at the same time. I would say what's great about, McTiernan as the OG is that, like, McTiernan on some level is a satirist. There's just like a little satire in the way the guy pricks his fingers, or in Dwayne T. Robinson, like all the people with power, like the Midsummer Night's Dream, that they're revealed to be fools, right?
Yes.
Len Wiseman isn't. And so
he's more of a literalist.
It's much more straight-faced.
Yeah.
So there's no there's no Hans Gruber. There's no one funny.
Well, and let's talk about the villain then on that point, because it brings us quite elegantly into the villain. The villain in this film is Timothy Olyphant as Thomas Gabriel. I mean, I have a bunch of thoughts, but it sounds like you have something to say off the gate.
I think this is terrible. I think he's a terrible villain. I like Timothy Olyphant as an actor. I think he's given the past few years some like incredible performances and things. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Alien Earth. He is amazing in it because he has this ability, which Bruce Willis says he's developed this, where you just want to watch him think. Mm-hmm. Where that guy leans back and you're like, what's he thinking? Like, he's great at that. He's not there in this movie. He's not that. I don't think his skills are quite there with that movie yet. It's also impossible. It's fucking impossible to be the villain in a movie where you've had the GOAT, Alan Rickman. You have William Sadler doing this terrifying thing in 2, and then fucking Jeremy Irons is the most flamboyantly cool villain in the history. Like, they're just such. And then all of a sudden you have this guy who's like,
Hook,
my name is Thomas Gibson,
and sinker.
Exactly.
So
or just great. Just the line about the taking a withdrawal. Oh, like the kind of the way he flamboyantly delivers. Like, it's just like a great actor, just like gnawing on the scenery in the best way. And so to be like, now we have this disenfranchised programmer, and he's played by like kind of like this like 32-year-old guy. Like, it's just a bad choice. It disappoints me a lot because I like Timothy Olyphant. I have a casting idea for this though that I'll share with you a little bit later.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll give you my 2 cents, and then I want to hear that. I mean, look, I'm a huge Olyphant fan. I was on the train. I remember seeing him in Scream 2, in which I'd never seen him in anything before that, and I was like, I generally got a pretty good eye for an actor that like is gonna pop. I mean, that was a flashy role. Another one I remember seeing was like Jeremy Renner in SWAT, and I was like, who is this guy? He is really interesting. So I've generally kind of had a sense of like, that guy is going places.
Was that on your 50th or 60th viewing of SWAT?
It was the first, actually. But so I've been on the train with him, and then I'll go and Gone in 60 Seconds, where he has a really good small part or supporting role. And I think this is a good performance where the character has a strong motivation and some vulnerability, especially when McClane starts to get under his skin. But I think, to your point, sort of also about the palette, it's all a little bit colorless. We know nothing about the character in terms of his personality. He has no quirks. He has no characteristics. There's no details. There is no nuance, whether it's even his physical appearance. It's all monochrome. His clothes, there's no color in his clothes. He has no facial hair. Yeah. He has no glasses. He has no tattoos. There is nothing. I mean, even if it was some kind of thing where he was like obsessed with, say, precision, or timing, and there was just some bit of personality in the character that he could, build a performance on. For me, Olyphant's always magnetic, even if this is quite a low-key performance by his standards, because he is amazing. I'm a huge Justified fan as well, but
he was born to do that kind of dialogue.
He is funny, like because he's got a great like sardonic sense of humor. The bits where he's like the guy's that got some minor injuries, like, are you going to be all right? And the bit where someone, I think Justin Long is nagging him, and he's like, yes, please be quiet. He has this great kind of sharp wit to him, but it's just so bland as a character that as you say, compared to Jeremy Irons, like this awesome titan Shakespearean actor, just being like, yeah, I'm gonna have fun with this, bleach blonde hair, really chew on it.
They bring the Shakespearean thing to it, and like that is the great gift of those actors, is that they could go play Coriolanus and then be like, I'm gonna go be in like Die Hard, and I'm gonna like bring that aplomb.
Exactly.
Like, I mean, Hans Gruber being like, nice suit, John Phillips, like,
while he's whistling.
Like,
it's a very nice suit.
Rumor has Arafat buys his there as well.
I mean, every choice that Rickman makes is genius. Should we
watch Die Hard right now?
There are things about that character beyond the fact that even if let's say it was a really bland actor. I'm not saying Olyphant is. I think Olyphant is a fantastic actor.
It's a bland
part. But if it was you put a bland actor doing all of those things. We know that Hans Gruber likes material things. He likes clothes. He's into, there is a precision to what he is about, precision tailorship, precision about process. He's quite kind of full of himself in the way that he speaks. He understands international business. There's a lot. That character is very dimensional, even though we know nothing about his personal life. If he was married, if he ever was married, does he have kids? We know none of that. But there's still characterization in his behavior while he's still going about the enaction of his plan. And in this, there is zero texture to the character, even though it's a solid performance by a fabulous actor.
I have like 30 million thoughts to follow up what you're saying, because I totally agree. The first is, I think there is something to the fact that the two best villains in this franchise are played by British actors. And I bring that up to say, because the British tradition is, it's such a silly story, but it's true. Dustin Hoffman runs all night.
Right.
And Laurence Olivier is like, why don't you try acting? Like, It's true. I think, with no disrespect to Olyphant, there's a technique that these British actors have, which is like, I may not have sat in my trailer and been like, what was Hans Gruber's childhood like? But I can like latch on to a way of speaking that's half German, half English accent. Like, he makes these very precise technical choices, right? In terms of like, he speaks a little German, but he's like, he almost has like a Fassbinder Indian tone to his voice, the way he interacts, the way he moves his body, right? Same thing with Irons in 3. Is there's like I can do things with my voice that actors, the simple time, like the way remember the first time you saw the movie?
Yes.
You can't understand what he's saying.
Right. And he pretended to have a stutter and things like that. And also they didn't do, even Sadler does it in 2, because there's a bit where he's like, we've got you. And he puts on this super sort of folksy
Sadler's a
voice to crash the plane.
Too.
Yeah, Sadler's, I gushed about his performance in that film in our episode on it. But this character doesn't have that. So a really interesting point, because they all the character puts on an accent or a performance, and in this film there's none of that real cleverness, except for the bit where he calls in the jet, but he doesn't really do anything with it. He
doesn't do anything with it.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So the second thing that I'll say,
cool idea, to be fair. Calling it taking control of a jet is pretty cool.
Yeah, except that
pretty cool idea.
It is really cool. The second thing I'll say is, from my point of view, is that he. He does do one thing that I think is really interesting, which is early on in the movie, he says, useful idiots.
I wrote that down, and I was so glad you brought this up, quoting Lenin.
But not, because that quote is misattributed and dates back to a British magazine from 1865. And a useful idiot is defined as a person that thinks they're fighting for a cause without fully comprehending the consequences of their actions. So, the great example, there's actually a great example of that in Die Hard, which is when the FBI shows up. You know who the useful idiots are?
Yeah.
The Johnsons.
They are 100% from Gruber's
They're
standpoint.
running the FBI. They have the FBI playbook, and they're running it all night.
That is brilliant.
But it does, he said Lenin. Like, it ascribes a political ideology to this character, which he doesn't
it's
really
never
have.
touched on. It's never. I'm really glad you brought this up, because I wrote that down to ask you about this, because I knew you would probably have more insight than I would about it. Because I was like,
those books are right there. Yeah,
so interesting. So he's quoting Lenin, but they never. Are you trying to say that he is like some kind of communist sympathizer?
Yeah.
Or has some kind of left wing ideology? But it's just sort of thrown in a, and then it's never. There's never that's never tethered to anything.
Well, and it's also like, in a way that you might say is subtle, is that later on in the movie, Bruce is like, yeah, you're going to steal all the money. And he goes, shouldn't I be paid for my work? Yeah. And it's like, this is the Die Hard. This is something this does right, is that actually, like, none of these people believe in anything. And so that was kind of my other thought, is that, like, you have that. So you have these sort of like British, technically brilliant actors, which is not to say that Olyphant isn't. I think he's developed incredible visual skill as an actor, but it's just not where he's at this point in his career, right? And it feels very like,
it's a high bar, to be fair, to
the other thing
get to.
The other big thing that I want to talk about is the representation of hacking and computers in a film.
But before we do that, before I forget, can I ask what your recasting idea was, though? So we don't, or is that coming? Am I jumping the gun?
No, I'll give it to you now. It's switching two people in the movie.
Okay.
Put Cliff Curtis in that role. And put Olyphant in the DHS.
Interesting.
Because I think Cliff Curtis, first of all, it's potentially, in a good or bad way, provocative, because people assume he's Middle Eastern all the time, right? So there's that aspect of it, which would be an interesting.
New Zealand, isn't he?
Well, exactly, right? But he's so often cast as
He's often cast as
he can be
different
ethnically ambiguous, right? Exactly.
Ethnicities,
But I just feel like he has a quiet and a poise to him that would be really
very menacing.
Interesting.
He can be very menacing,
and because I think, in a guy he's so fucking good in like Training Day and like all these small roles he does in his career, that like, I feel like he's just a little miscast in this part. I feel like this is very clearly a let's get a Cliff Curtis
idea.
And he's just kind of like McClane, and like whereas like I could kind of just see Olyphant doing that in his sleep and kind of being
really good, and he sort of fits aesthetically in that world as like he's like an FBI high level guy, but you sense he's like one of the good guys in that world, and he's a bit more youthful, so he's a bit less cynical and broken, like you know. And
he bridges the gap between Justin Long and Bruce Willis in a way that kind of works age-wise, because Justin Long looks perpetually 22. So the last thing I'll say is that this is the tail end of computer hacking, being a bunch of typing on screen that makes no sense. Like, if you stop and think about what they're doing on those screens, you're like, none of this makes sense. And I only bring that up because this movie predates like the full pivot, the way the internet pivoted to video wholeheartedly. Now you watch things on, you watch people on their phones on whatever, it looks very like, for better or for worse, very natural. But this movie, unfortunately, is still in the age of like, I'm doing some computer hacking, click, 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 click. And it just like, it's too much time on screens, right? Like they haven't mastered it visually.
Yeah, we talked about this, I think, with Swordfish and some of the other ones. Computer hacking is it's not cinematic.
Yep.
So you have to work pretty hard to find ways to make it feel cinematic.
There's one really good I think, great example of this, which is the way Michael Mann handles it in Black Hat, where you actually see what happens within the system to cause but most of the time it's just like it's he's in. Like, whenever they say that in one of these movies, like he's like, you're just kind of like, this is just not cinematic. It's he's in.
What is that? Is giving me like a memory of a particular film. I can't think what it is.
It's every one of these movies where they're hackers. They go like even The Matrix, but that's literally he's in.
Well, that's a good example of how to do it right, because you like you're saying, and sort of the black hat thing, you kind of literalize it in some way.
Well, that is the movie that invents actual cyberspace in our brains, right? Like that's the mythic movie.
Is there anything you want to say about the other two characters? The other, you just touched on one of them, Justin Long as Matt Farrell, or Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Lucy McClane.
Love Mary Elizabeth Winstead. Huge fan of her in Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the movie I love. Justin Long gets a raw deal. I think he's fine. Like, I don't think this is a great character. I think he and Bruce have chemistry. I don't know. The people are just like, oh, Justin Long stinks in this. It's like, he's doing the best with the part that, could I see Paul Dano in this part? Kind of, but he's not funny enough. So, like, I think Justin Long is pretty fun in this movie.
I like him a lot.
Thing.
I think what they do that's clever about it as well, because I was thinking about this, is what it does do that's at least original. And it's weird that they never did this in a previous film. If you think about it, in each film, he has a kind of ally character. There's one ally usually. In the original one, of course, it's Al Powell, who is roughly a contemporary in terms of age. Mm-hmm. In the second one, he has like R. Evans, for example, who is like also a little bit older, as the kind of like one sort of blue collar scrappy guy on the airport engineer who like knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And he respects him, and because he's like a guy that's got grease under his fingernails type guy, which is what McClane is, rather than the sort of the suits, right? And the third one, obviously, has Zeus, played by Samuel L. Jackson, again a contemporary in terms of age. But in this one, it's like he's obviously McClane has got older, so it's a cool idea to accentuate this sort of the idea of the Timex watch in a digital world,
the millennial,
with someone who is across this stuff,
right?
And I do actually think that is really fun, except for the part where he's like bullying him. He just comes across as a bully. Too much of the time. And Mary Elizabeth Winstead, who is a great actress, just doesn't really get much to do, sadly.
But you can feel that she's his daughter. I think that is like, she does a good job of being a pain in the ass, and
tough and takes no shit. And
it's interesting that so this is 2007. So Justin Long would have been, so he's like 30 when this movie is made, right? But he reads as millennial, even though he's Gen X technically. He's like late Gen X. But this is kind of the movie about the boomer having to deal with the millennial, for lack of a better word, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in a weird way, McClane becoming like a racist asshole mirrors that, kinda unfortunately, tracks. Of many older American in this country. That's unfortunate. Yeah. I'm sure she'll come up later, but
except now they're kind of cool with attacks on the country from within, right? Let's talk about the action.
The good guy in their version is the Doge guys from this movie.
The action is very strong.
It's awesome.
Very, very strong. That is, you can say what you like about some aspects of Len Wiseman, whether you like him or not, but boy, can this guy direct an action sequence and conceive it. And the other interesting thing, a lot of this stuff, it did come from him, like that amazing stunt in the tunnel where the car, they are shielded by like two cars. There's another one flipping over them, Tony Scott style, about to hit them. He talks on the commentary, and to your point, I think about Bruce's authorial, connection to the part.
Are they on the commentary together?
Both of them are on it together
cool.
At the same time. At the same time,
okay.
Yeah, recorded with the editor.
I assumed it would be not.
They're very simpatico, and they seem to have a lot of like trust and goodwill. And I think that Len Wiseman had made a Die Hard film as a teenager, like a home video, and that won him a lot of goodwill and stuff. And Len Wiseman is very, very concerned about maintaining the spirit of a Die Hard film. He isn't trying. His rhetoric on the commentary is very much like, I was desperate to make sure that this still felt like a Die Hard film. He wasn't trying to sort of, what's past is past, and I'm going to stamp my authority on this. Now, it's up to you to decide whether you think that was successful or not. I think it's a mix, but there were certain things in it where he was like this sequence should be in an elevator shaft with the car that's going to fall in the Mackie Q sequence, because that's Die Hard.
That shit
things
rules.
like that. The action's fantastic. And,
it is really good.
Very inventive. The fire hydrant stuff with the helicopter, which I think was Bruce Willis's idea on the day, according to the commentary.
Obviously it strains credulity, but it still rules, and like, I think that actually, I was thinking earlier about something you said, which is like, we're not worried about Bruce in this one. We're not worried about McClane dying. I'm kind of fine with that in the fourth Die Hard movie. Like, I'm kind of
by this point, like, it's obviously evolved. It's evolved from, but this is the problem with the Die Hard sequels in general, because in the first movie, Bruce Willis in 1988 was an unknown commodity to mainstream movie audiences, and it really did look like this ordinary guy was going to die. By the time that was really successful, and they were making sequels, on some level that he's not going to die. But I do think you can still think that he is going to lose in certain situations or certain battles. He should always feel like the underdog. He should always feel like, how the fuck is he going to get out of this situation that he's totally outmatched? And somehow by, with duct tape and sweat and a never say die attitude, he pulls it off.
Totally.
As opposed to, I'm going to put on my cape and jump onto the plane. And you just never feel like he's even going to fall off it, let alone, a die.
Well, right? One of the fun, I'm sure Jason won't mind this, but I was texting him over the weekend when I was watching it. And one of the funniest things he said in his text was, he like beats up a jet.
Yeah, that kind of nails it. Yeah,
which is like, it's
like like the Incredible Hulk, like picks up the jet and lassos it, and then throws it off the planet.
The expression is jumps the shark, but in this case, it's beats the jet, right?
Yeah,
like, it's just it's a little too much. But it's exciting to watch. And like, I'll say this, I may sound like I'll shit on certain superhero movies. Like, the action is better in this than it is in 90% of the action movies that get made now, because it feels physical, even when it's ridiculous.
Yes, well said. And it does remind, the physics of some of it do make me think of sort of like the physics of like a 70s James Bond film, the kind of Roger Moore era stuff, where there's an element of almost silliness to it, like with the fire hydrant bit type
for
thing.
Your Eyes Only, or like one of these, totally.
Right, like
even
that
a later
era.
period, Sean Connery, Diamonds Are Forever, it could totally play in that.
It does, to your point, I think feels like the post-Bourne superheroification of the series and the character. And whether that works for you, is up to you. I'm certainly, but you cannot. I don't think you can complain about the quality of the action, the inventiveness of it, and some of the stunt work is absolutely,
because that's kind of by this point what you're looking for. Like, you want, if we know he's not going to die, the circumstances should be more and more insane. Like that car flipping over with the other two cars, like, I jumped up in my seat. I thought it ruled, and like, I just think like watching him slide down the F-18 is cool. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, at this point, I'm not like, that's not realistic.
Right.
Like,
we're folding your arms and being like, that's not my John McClane.
What is, and they don't get there with this, and I don't want to lay on this too long, is the nature of the crime is much more interesting in this than it might be. Like, that's what's innovative about this. Like, there's a couple things in this movie that are crazy prophetic. One thing is they hack Social Security records, which is something we're talking about now. There's reference to large server farms. Like, we need more data to be able to do this. It's like so kind of like, again, I love it when action movies have relevance.
It's timely. Yeah, it was timely. It was talking about, it was essentially a fresh start. Like we said, Die Hard reset, and if you take it on those terms, and if it was framed that way, actually, if it was framed, so going in, we've had the first three films. This is something different. There's a psychological adjustment that you maybe make to be like, okay, it's like a new cycle. It's not that, and this is what I mean about the fundamental schism that occurs with a fourth film, where you're sort of like, but it's so different. And yes, there are certain things that are spiritually in keeping with the character and with a Die Hard type film, but there's something about the tonality and the mean streak of the McClane character that throw you off. But if it was called Die Hard Reset, I think you would maybe get a bit more buy-in on that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing you're getting at is it's very challenging. And I think the Greengrass book that I mentioned before gets at this, which is you can't have your cake and eat it too with a fourth film, because you can only be innovative and new to such degree, right? I mean, this is a problem with comic book movies now too, is they've kind of like, unless you can find a really novel concept, unless you can find like a metaphor for what it really is, you read these interviews sometimes and they'd be like, oh, it's like my version of 3 Days of the Condor. And you'd be like, okay, like it's cool to reference that, but like you can't only do so much new. And what I think is interesting is that what Len Wiseman does that's new creates a tension in the original formulation of Die Hard, but it's cool on its own terms.
Yep. Fair, very fair and very well
One other thing that I think, to your point about him honoring the spirit, is there's a great little bit of dialogue where McClane goes, "Do you call 1-800-HENCHMEN to get these guys?" Yeah. And I feel like that's like enough munitions to orbit Arnold Schwarzenegger from the original. It has a kind of like meta quality to it that I think Die Hard is responsible for creating.
Which also brings us into the final tenet, which is the humor section. We've already talked a bit about Justin Long, but let's talk about Kevin Smith. And he has a brief role where he plays a sort of much vaunted and semi-legendary hacker goes by the name of Warlock. Bruce and Kevin Smith are famously Jersey guys.
Is this Cop Out before this or after
Cop Out
this?
was after this. Kevin Smith has written about this in his book, which I've read, and is pretty unflinching about. At this point, I think he portrayed it. This was a very positive experience with Bruce Willis, and he told that amazing story that I mentioned in a previous episode, this is to the point about Bruce and Wiseman being in lockstep, when the studio, who were really, I think, pretty tough going. I mean, Wiseman's telling these stories about how he had to convince them of everything, had to do a lot of selling to like sell them on, we're going to do this stunt and this is how we're going to do it.
Meanwhile, the movie makes $400 million.
And yeah, the studio, I think, from their standpoint, being very exacting, because they know it's such a valuable property and that these choices need to be correct. And it isn't McTiernan, it's somebody new who was relatively young. And anyway, there's this famous story where Bruce is, dealing with the studio, and then eventually, in Wiseman's defense, essentially, because he felt there was a lot of interference and getting in his way, he's listening, going, yeah. Okay, let me ask you something. Who's your second choice to play John McClane?
Yeah.
Silence. That's what I thought. Boom. Like, leave him alone, basically. Like, let him do the job. Which is sort of what Connery had to do for Michael Bay on The Rock, and occasionally that like 800-pound gorilla movie star that no one will fuck with, like a Connery or a Bruce, will use their weight to protect the director from the money men and stuff. So it does show that they were very much in sync. So Kevin Smith talked about this. They later had a very bad experience, legendarily toxic on Cop Out.
I listen, I have no insider knowledge of this, but I've read a couple things that suggest that Cop Out is the beginning of some of Bruce's decline, like that it was maybe starting then. So like, who knows if that's true or not, but I've read things to suggest that his behavior on that movie was kind of like, and if you've ever spent anyone going through that happens. They become really cranky and their behavior changes. So like, I've always wondered about that a little bit, because that story bums me out.
Yeah.
Obviously. I do think there's something really interesting in how hackers were always portrayed as these dudes that live in their mom's basements and are like pieces of shit that can't get laid. And it turns out all of that's true, unfortunately, in a lot of ways. But like, it's interesting that Kevin Smith plays like just this chunky, dude who like,
does it fit? Look, I'm a big Kevin Smith fan. His filmography is obviously, erratic. There's stuff on there that I'm sure, but he's a good enough dude.
Made a Die Hard movie
to be like, what's it called? Red State, right?
State.
Fantastic movie.
I like that movie.
Amazingly talented guy, and someone I really am personally really fond of.
In a lot of ways.
A very important figure and a good enough person to admit when he's like done a movie that isn't great, and he'll take the piss out of himself. And I love him. I really think he's great. It's no slight on him. I just think there is something. He has such a strong personality. It's almost like the Sidney Bernstein scene where that's a different tonal film, so it works, right? But when you get someone, it's like Andrew Dice Clay is suddenly in this film. Someone that has like such a giant personality that it almost like doesn't tonally sync.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? And apparently Kevin Smith rewrote all his dialogue, and Bruce Willis told him it's actually now too funny. You have to make it less funny, because you could imagine it being like a clerk scene.
That's what he's good at.
Because he's a brilliant writer, and you could imagine it being hysterical. But it's like that is a really interesting example of like, just because something is really good and funny doesn't mean it can be in the movie, because it's not tonally cohesive.
Well, and I also think that like, maybe I remember the original trailer for this movie, because the original trailer kind of doesn't get to McClane until like the 1 minute mark. It's kind of like, it sets itself up as like an Independence Day style attack on America, or whatever you want to say. And then like, and just so happens that John McClane, but I'm sure like, you know, TV spots or advertising during sporting events probably showed Justin Long and Kevin Smith. And people were like, what the fuck is this? Like it doesn't do the movie any favors that it has these two like comedians known for being kind of goofballs at the center of it, you know, like Justin Long's doing like I don't mean this disrespectfully of him, but he's had a weird career. And part of the weird thing of his career is he's like, hi, I'm the T-Mobile guy, or whatever phone so it's like, it's kind of weird that like in a very sort of like specific, the original Die Hard's funny, but it's not by no means is it a comedy, right? So that all of a sudden, like in the fourth film, you have these two guys who are kind of known for slacker, independent films, and also like the guy who's kind of like, it's kind of like the funny Joseph Gordon-Levitt who's in like teen movies is all of a sudden in a Die Hard movie. Like that in and of itself, that formulation, like kind of markets the movie in a way. Now, obviously it doesn't matter. The movie does really, really well, but no one's talking about the movie in the way that, you know, we are going into detail about it here. So I only bring it up to say that like, it is kind of a like tonal disjoint.
Yes. I do think it's a bit odd. As much as I really, really like Kevin Smith and I see why he was cast, and it's like one of those decisions that makes sense intellectually, but not viscerally.
Yes. And I also think the humor that McClane has, the stuff where he's shitty to, Olyphant is funny, and the stuff that Olyphant does is funny, but that's kind of what should be funny in the movie. There shouldn't, like, it's kind of nuts that they just go to this guy's house and like they meet the mom. Like it's a little and like
it's very like, I was trying to think like, did this invent that cliche, or was it just like repeating
Wedding Crashers did it first?
Well, that's it, isn't it? Mom, the meatloaf.
There are movies that did that before, but it is essentially Wedding Crashers.
All right, let's do our one of our favorite sections of the show before we take a break and wrap this up. Because first of all, we have to put on our tuxedos and head
this is Oscar time.
The Die Hard Oscars, starting with the John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Award for Best Line. What have I got? I've got 4 here. The one I thought this was a brilliant line in that amazing sequence that they say is like a video ransom note, which apparently took months to edit, of all the presidents being cut together speaking when they kind of
it's so Doge coded, man. It's wild,
brilliant. Yeah. But there's a bit when it ends. Trey, Gabriel's main hacker, says, "I tried to find more Nixon." I thought that was really great. Remember when Nixon was the worst bad guy we had in the White House? Good times.
I don't, but it seems pretty bad.
The other thing that could happen, the other thing that could happen is I could go down there, kick your ass, and throw you out your own party. I think that's McClane. I'm trying to remember who McClane says that to. I kind of like that turn of phrase.
That's a good McClane line.
It sounded like the McClane of the original movie. A famous one from this, a real trailer moment. You just killed a helicopter with a car. I was out of bullets. I mean, that is like beating up the jet, but it still rocks, right? Yeah. And now the one yearning for depth that actually, which I like in these films, was when McClane says, "You know what you get for being a hero? Nothing. You get shot at."
So this movie is actually incredibly Shane Black coded. In the way McClane is. Like, you know what you do? You make this a Last Boy Scout sequel, and this is Joe Hallenbeck, because he's closer to Joe Hallenbeck in his like noxious qualities than he is to McClane, right? Like, so I've just been thinking about that whole time. Like, kind of
even with that character, right? And Hallenbeck is like such a sourpuss. He's so cutting to people, but you never like dislike him because he's never being he's just not bullying, and even he's like kind of rude to Halle Berry's character and stuff, and that. But it's coming from this weird form of paternalism.
And he's a hard-boiled detective.
Yeah, it's Anyway, what was your pick? Or do you have another one that you liked?
I really like the useful idiots thing just because it's an interesting bit, but it's not really a line. I mean, I think you have to go with I was out of bullets. That's
pretty,
the juice.
Pretty great. It's pretty great. All right, the Hans Gruber Exceptional Thief Award for stealing the film. I have nominated Justin Long as Matt Farrell, Timothy Olyphant as Thomas Gabriel, Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Lucy McClane, Cliff Curtis as Bowman, and Maggie Q as Mai.
Maggie Q is my 100 times over. I think she's just, first of all, they kill her too early. She's Carl. Why does she go so early in the movie?
Yeah.
Even though the way she goes is cool. And I just think Maggie Q's a badass. Like, she's really cool and very striking. So I that would be my pick. And I just feel like nobody else is in the movie enough to justify it. And as much as I like Olyphant, this is not anywhere near the top tier of his abilities.
Yeah, I think I really like Cliff Curtis, even though I kind of I think your argument is you make a fantastic case for flipping those parts. I think that could have been really interesting. But I do really enjoy him in this role. And I think I like that for once it's a Die Hard film where it's like not everyone at the federal authority level is a completely incompetent idiot. Like, this guy is back-footed, and then clearly he realizes that there are some cybersecurity weaknesses, but he's like basically a good guy doing his best. And
one line I forgot about that I actually really like in this movie, even though it's depressing, which is when he says, when Justin Long's character says, it took FEMA 5 days to get water to the Superdome. I like that kind of. He just says it, you know what he's talking about, and then the movie moves on.
Yeah. Well, powerful. It's about the behemoth of the U.S. government, which is of a kind of like lumbering dinosaur in a situation when this world, and that's what the article is fundamentally about, is like this machinery is very unwieldy and moves slowly, and it's all different gears and pistons that don't connect.
That is the most prophetic thing about that article. It's just what happens when you try to dismantle the dinosaur.
Speaking of Nixon, Nixon called it the beast. He called like this type of thing. It was like, the beast is like wild. He talk, it's quite interesting how he would talk about it. It's like you can't control it. It's too wild. It's too big, etc., etc. The Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the Movie.
Richard Nixon.
Well, tricky dick. Jonathan Sadowski as Trey, the main hacker for Thomas Gabriel. That dude sucks. There wasn't a ton, actually. Joe Garrity as Jack Parry, the NSA liaison who shows up at the FBI Interbands of Workspace. Didn't like him.
No.
And my choice, John McClane. John McClane himself.
Yeah. Those French guys at the beginning are pretty annoying too. You're right.
He really is.
The Italian guy kind of sucks. The special forces guy who's also a hacker with the tattoos on his arm.
Oh yeah.
He kind of sucks. I don't know why they're foreign. It's an interesting choice in the context of the movie. Yeah, McClane sucks in this movie, so let's go with him. If I can't have Richard Nixon, I'll go with Bruce Willis. I mean, John McClane.
Best death. McClane shooting a fire extinguisher and blowing a guy through a window. McClane destroying the helicopter with a police car.
That shit rules.
McClane killing Gabriel by allowing him to shoot himself through McClane's body. All pretty. Oh,
it's Maggie Q. It's the way Maggie Q goes, man. I love that. That's my pick because that's maybe the second best action scene in the movie.
I'm going to go with
cliffhanger.
Destroying the helicopter with a police car.
That's a good pick.
I think in conclusion, before we move into our final section, it kind of comes. I think this is actually a terrific action movie with a big, brilliant idea that's explored in a really cool and interesting way. I just have issues with its congruency as part of the Die Hard series.
Yeah, I mean, I can't add to that. I think one's mileage will vary.
Let's wrap things up. Let's take one last break and then wrap things up with our final favorite section of the show, the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz, where the scores can't really change. We'll be right back. And we're back.
How was your break?
With our final favourite section. Remarkable. Thank you for asking. With our final favourite section in the show, the Double Jeopardy Trivia Quiz. Okay, 3 quiz questions, which amazingly haven't come up, which is good because I don't have a backup this week. And you know the deal. All right, here we go. Get one clue. Question number 1. Die Hard 4, which I'm going to call it, features a memorable scene where various presidential speeches are cut together as part of a chilling video ransom note. But in which pulpy 2013 film did Mary Elizabeth Winstead play the role of Mary Todd Lincoln, the wife of Abraham Lincoln and the First Lady of the United States?
Abraham Lincoln, Vampire Hunter.
Is correct. Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah, of course. It's fun.
Is it good?
No, but it's fun.
Okay. Question number 2. Warlock's apartment contains a life-size replica of Boba Fett, the iconic bounty hunter from the Star Wars series. But which member of the Die Hard 4 cast subsequently appeared in both The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett TV series?
I have a guess, but I'm going to take the clue. It's Olyphant. It's Olyphant.
Olyphant is correct. He played Cobb Vanth in the Star Wars series. And
Did you watch those?
No.
Fair
and appeared in both Alien Earth and the Terminator Zero animated TV series. So he voiced the Terminator. I mean, he's absolutely crushing the franchise game.
Alien Earth is not very good. They're similar to this. It has some very compelling ideas at it. It's not really an alien thing. It's actually more a Blade Runner thing. Olyphant is amazing in it.
You don't have to sell me on him. I'm a huge fan. Also, what was that great horror movie he did? The Crazies. Have you seen The Crazies?
Mm-hmm. I like The Crazies.
In that. All right, final question. Which previous Bruce Willis action movie, made in 2002, is often erroneously reported to have been a planned Die Hard sequel?
2002. We've not covered it.
We have not covered it.
Give me a clue.
You want to phone out?
I want to call Justin Long. Right. I'm going to call Meg. I'm going to call Maggie Q, if you know what I'm
saying. Just breathe heavily down the phone. The film,
like a nice Zodiac.
The film set in Africa was directed by Antoine Fuqua.
Tears of the Sun.
Indeed. Now, the Wikipedia entry says this, which I find hard to believe. After the success of Die Hard with a Vengeance, 20th Century Fox began working on a 4th film. In 1997, they purchased a script entitled Tears of the Sun, written by Alan B. McElroy, which was about a group of people who go to set up a radio relay station deep inside the Amazon jungle, but are captured by a drug lord and his gang, who force them to work as slaves in his mine. Willis liked Tears of the Sun, the title, so much that he requested that one of his films be retitled Tears of the Sun instead of Hostile Rescue or Man of War, in exchange for starring in another Die Hard film. I find that very hard to that last bit. I think there was a bit more to. I don't think that would get it done. Yeah, do that plus 20 million and the rest, right? And a percentage of the profits, please.
I've heard that he liked that title. I've never heard that he agreed to have that be the name of an Antoine Fuqua movie. No, with no disrespect to Antoine Fuqua, but it's that's a pretty forgotten movie. I don't think anyone was like, "Oh man, we gotta It's funny I don't want to. We've gone long enough here, but the fact that Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis do these foreign set movies later in their Collateral Damage and
starring Cliff Curtis,
kind of interesting.
To your point,
directed by Andrew Davis, our guy.
Well, we love it. We love you, Andrew Davis. If you're still listening. Well, that about does it for today, but it doesn't do it for this episode because we do have a pretty important announcement. And there's no other way to say it than to just kind of tear the Band-Aid off.
Band-Aid off. Get the glass
after much
out of your
discussion,
feet.
We've decided that the end of the show is nigh, and we feel that this project would the most. We've talked about it. We sort of knew there would be a natural end point for the show, and that end point feels like it really should be the 5th and final Die Hard film, which will be coming up in about 7 episodes' time. And that would feel like the most elegant bookend to this endeavor. Otherwise, it sort of continues as a loose thread, and frankly, the quality of films beyond a certain point do decrease. Not always. There's still some great ones being made here and there, but overall, it just feels like it's the right time to sort of complete the project, and that feels like a really clean exit point.
We all know Die Hard 5 is the best Die Hard movie, and we wanted to. No, I think you're right, and I think we had this massive list when we started the project, and we've whittled it down for reasons of quality and for reasons of time, and also because I think my personal opinion is we're doing this in a year and a half and we're like, okay, with no shitty third movie in a franchise of movies we didn't like to begin with anyways, like we wanted to wrap on a higher note.
Yeah, and there's I think 7 films left. I'd say 6 of them are fantastic, and then there's the last Die Hard film, which we have to cover, and that does feel like the right point to just sort of like close the book on this one for now. But that still means there's another 3 months or so of the show, another 12 weeks or so of episodes. But in connection to that, because we are discussing potential other projects, and we of course still have our Patreon, which is going on for another 18 episodes when we complete our 48 hours of buddy movies, those 48 films. We have done we're about episode 30 I think was fled there,
and the back half is full of bangers.
Oh, straight bangers. We've got like LA Confidential coming up. We've got like Long Kiss Goodnight, I think, is the very next episode. And then we've got so many great movies coming up down the pike, and we will announce what the next season will be in due course. But what the main thing I want to encourage you guys to do, especially if you're worried about, or you're maybe a little bit sad that the show is coming to an end, and if you do, as we are, because we've loved this and we love you guys and we've loved our guests, and we're not done yet. We've still got a ways to go, but to stay in touch, here's what you can do. And we're not asking for any money or anything like that. You don't even have to become a paid member. You can be a free member on the Patreon. Just to remind you, the web address is
Have we ever said it on the show before?
I'm assuming that some people only listen to the Die Hard films on this show. So it's www.patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies, as in the number 48 hours of buddy movies. And you obviously, we would love it if you sign up to get all the content, to get the episodes, which are exclusively for paid members of that show. But you can become a free member. Can you explain to people how that works, so that they can just get the announcements and stay in touch about our next project? And
just sign up and choose the free level, and you'll get updates as we send them out. If you pay, you get a week episode every 2 weeks. But if you just want to sign up to keep in touch, just choose the free tier.
And I can tell you that you would be in illustrious company, because I was looking the other day at the Patreon and I was thrilled to see that one of the free members is Stephen E. D'Souza, the writer of Die Hard and 48 Hours, amongst many other astonishing, iconic films.
Stephen, get involved.
If you're listening, Stephen, get involved. Hit us up. We'd love to figure something out with you. I've been at the Running Man Q&A that he was at in person in downtown LA. He is a fabulous raconteur. He's got incredible stories, as you can well imagine, from a glittering career in film. So you would be among folks of that caliber. So stay part of the community and go to www.patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies. The next film on that show, as we mentioned, will be The Long Kiss Goodnight, which, by the way,
rocks.
Oh my gosh, that really film! I just rewatched it. I was like, I always loved that film, but I was like, this film is astonishing.
It's great.
It is so
really good.
Great.
I love it.
So
I can't wait.
That one won't be another dud like Fled was. That will be an absolute corker. It's okay
to be a Fled head.
But next time on this show, we were unable to persuade Jason Bailey to come in for Die Hard 4, but we are hopefully bringing him in for the taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, the Tony Scott remake.
I'm excited to talk about this.
So hopefully we can line that up. I probably shouldn't have said that until we'd actually confirmed it, but we would love to have him back for that one. Gandolfini in the house, of course, in alongside Denzel Washington and John Travolta.
And then he will be one of our hat tricks.
Yes, a very elite club.
We should hype it up even though we haven't recorded it more. I feel like this is a good move.
Just tell people how amazing that episode was that we haven't recorded. So that's it. Thank you all for being part of this journey. It isn't over yet, but it is coming to, I think, a natural end fairly soon. But yeah, get involved with the Patreon and we'll keep in touch and let you know about what are the things we may be doing in the future.
We'll be back next time with John Travolta's greatest goatee.
Hear, hear.
Die Hard on a Blank is a podcast from Philip Gothorn and Liam Billingham. Tyson Hubley makes our art. You can hear exclusive episodes of our Patreon show at patreon.com/48 hours of buddy movies. Rate, review, subscribe, and tell your action movie-loving friends about the show. See you next time on Die Hard on a Blank.